I could not believe that he was not elected to the Hall of Fame.
It's a travesty.
I think it's a crime.
It's the ultimate snub.
They're not Hall of Famers.
Come on, what a joke.
The Hall of Fame is the NFL's highest honor, and Enshrinement Day is well worth the wait.
It was fun. What a ride.
Take a look at these guys. What a team it is.
Our motto is a commitment to excellence. And I told Al one time that I should have been committed a long time ago.
This is a team you can campaign for.
Put the thing on me and duck myself. I got Hall of Fame numbers and they don't.
But only writers can get you in.
There is no Hall of Fame that is more difficult to get into.
Numbers aren't the only answer.
Are they slanted towards offense?
We're still trying to figure out a stat for a right guard.
All it takes is one or two guys who, look, I just don't like this guy.
I don't want you in here. You're Pittsburgh Steelers.
To make our list of the top 10 players not in the Hall of Fame, a player had to have been rejected at least once by the voters.
Be delayed but not denied. That's what the Bible says.
Sorry, Dion. Our criteria is tough.
Was there a point in your career where people thought you were the best at your position?
When you watch this guy play, you said, I'm watching something really special here.
Can you tell the story of the NFL and not include his name?
The number 10 player not in the Hall of Fame, Ken Anderson.
It didn't help Ken Anderson that he had an awful mustache. That does not look good on a bust. Oof. You understand? Shave it. Am I going to be immortalized in the Hall of Fame with a crop duster?
If NFL computers were programmed to construct the ideal quarterback, they would print out Kenny Anderson.
I definitely believe Ken Anderson belongs in the Hall of Fame. He was an NFL MVP, a four-time Pro Bowler, four-time NFL passing champion.
What a throw from Anderson.
And he played with consistency for 16 years.
Absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame, 100%. You could put his statistics up against 75% of the quarterbacks that are in the Hall of Fame, and he will have them beaten in every particular category.
Anderson is going to get in.
If you look at his 1974 and 1975 seasons,
Looks fires into the end zone. Touchdown.
they're some of the best seasons of all time. He was completing 62% of his passes at a time when the NFL average was 52%.
If I had a son who was right-handed and I wanted him to watch somebody throw the football, watch him just perform, watch his footwork and watch his arm, Kenny Anderson would be as good as any.
Heck, I just want Kenny Anderson's name to appear on the final 25 or 15. Ken Anderson can't get in that room. There's like a barricade on that door.
Ken Anderson usually came up with a lot of competition. I was a Ken Anderson man. But if there were other people that were better, and sometimes there were, then it was tough, and Ken didn't make it.
But it was our number 10 player, not Joe Montana, who proved the West Coast offense could work in the NFL.
He was the first quarterback that really ran the West Coast offense that Bill Walsh took from Cincinnati and instilled out in San Francisco with his modifications. Ken Anderson was a pioneer.
Anderson back to throw. Looks, fires into the end zone. Touchdown.
I don't know if that means he's a Hall of Famer, but I think it means he shouldn't be forgotten.
Kenny right now is probably the epitome of the NFL quarterbacks. To run the kind of offense that we're running right now, you have to be able to read defenses almost flawlessly.
The temperature in greater Cincinnati has dropped to 9 below. We're talking a wind-chilled 59 degrees below zero.
He played another great quarterback who's in the Hall of Fame and who also deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, and that's Dan Fouts, in the biggest game of Dan Fouts' career.
The Freezer Bowl in Cincinnati for the AFC title in 1981.
And who won the game?
Dan Fouts got in the Hall of Fame, and Ken Anderson beat him.
The Bengals put this AFC title away.
I think that's a silly argument. Frank Ryan beat Johnny Unitas in the 1964 NFL championship game. Is somebody going to tell me that Frank Ryan should be in the Hall of Fame and Johnny Unitas shouldn't?
I think the fact that he never had great postseason success will always hurt him.
Here's Anderson backpedaling, throws a pass over the middle. And it's intercepted by Ryan.
Ken Anderson, had he won the Super Bowl after the 1981 season against the 49ers,
I don't believe he's in there. The 49ers have held.
he would definitely be in the Hall of Fame.
The 49ers have won it, beating the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl.
Wasn't his fault. They lost 26-21 close game. Heck of a player. But when I think of Hall of Famer, I don't want to have to think about whether he's a Hall of Famer. I want to know, you know what? Roger Staubach, he's a Hall of Famer. John Elway, Hall of Famer. With Anderson, you got to think about it.
If you're a quarterback looking to get in the Hall of Fame and you never won a Super Bowl, your argument is very thin, very weak. Ken Anderson didn't do that. I cannot take any argument that he should be in seriously because of that.
In the Hall of Fame today, kicker Jan Stenerud stands as a pure special teams player.
It gives me a sense of pride and accomplishment, but most of all, I feel very, very lucky.
It's a travesty.
I think it's a crime.
It's an injustice.
Those were very kind words, and I appreciate them very much.
There's still a prejudice among the voters against special teams players.
Another Scandinavian has yet to make it into the Hall, despite high praise from one of their own.
You're the best that ever was. Thank you.
On December 16, 2006, Morten Andersen kicked his way into immortality as the league's all-time scorer.
Morten Andersen has just become the NFL's all-time career scoring leader. How about that?
However, scoring over 2,500 points has yet to sway the voters, much like this other special teamer who did make our list.
The number 9 player not in the Hall of Fame, Steve Tasker.
You guys are out of your territory over your special teams guys, aren't you?
You're a superstar.
Yeah.
Steve Tasker defined what a special team player is.
Even Bill Parcells told Marv Levy that he had to game plan around Steve Tasker. This man was the greatest special teams player of all time.
He played an incredibly vital role on that team, and that team dominated the AFC for 4 or 5 years.
Marv Levy called him one time the most important man on his team.
Okay, Steve, have a good one, pal.
That wasn't just, okay, nice try-hard guy. Steve Tasker is really a world-class athlete.
He was generally considered, by consensus, the best special teams player in the league over a good period of time.
He was a very good cover man. He was a very good kick blocker.
And the kick is blocked. Steve Tasker.
Can you say special team?
He's the best I've ever seen at covering kicks, covering punts, and he could make a play for you every once in a while on the wide out position.
Throw to the end zone. Tasker, and he got it.
Jim Kelly, the quarterback, lobbied all the time to get Marv Levy to let him play wide receiver, but Levy wouldn't let him. Most coaches don't want to waste their good players on special teams. Well, Marv Levy didn't want to waste Steve Tasker to play in the regular offense.
What a little competitor that son of a
Special team guys, they're not Hall of Famers. I mean, you got to play the game totally.
As a matter of fact, special teams is a third of the game.
Special teams is 1/3 of the game.
Third of the game. Special teams is not a third of the game. If it was really a third of the game, you'd see special teamers being drafted in the first round all the time.
I think it's hard to put a special teams guy in the Hall of Fame. They might be great at it, but why is he on special teams? Because he can't start on offense and he can't start on defense.
When you talk about the Hall of Fame, it's a very special thing. And to put a kicker in there or a special teams guy, you're basically spitting on the face of Dick Butkus.
Oh, man.
And he doesn't like that very much.
I think there's definitely a case to make for a special teams guy, and I think Steve Tasker should be the first name you think of.
It's ridiculous that Steve Tasker is not in the Hall of Fame.
If I had to vote, I'd vote for Steve Tasker.
If you're going to say how important special teams are, then if the player that's the best ever at that certain craft isn't in the Hall of Fame, then you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. If Steve Tasker is the best special team player ever, which I think he is,
That's the most spectacular special teams play I have ever seen.
he's first ballot.
That's all she wrote, guys. The number 8 player not in the Hall of Fame, Alex Karras.
You think of Butkus for the Bears, and you think of Karras for the Lions. I always thought he was a beast.
Our number 8 selection was nicknamed the Mad Duck.
I waddle because my legs are so small. That's probably why I'm not in the National Football League Hall of Fame, is because I was the wild duck instead of the ruffian bear. Wild ducks don't get in the Hall of Fame.
But maybe there were other reasons.
Alex Karras, you played against him. Should he be Canton?
No.
Alex was a dirty football player. He wasn't the cleanest player in the world, I could say that.
He was the toughness of the Detroit Lions. I mean, he was a terror.
He was ferocious. He hated quarterbacks, including his own. He called them milk-drinking quarterbacks.
I don't know, they got this idea that I was this ruffian, this rough, tough character, and I played that role because when you get dubbed that role, you might as well play that role.
But our number 8 selection's most memorable roles came not on the football field, but the silver screen.
Pretty good football player, pretty bad actor. Actually, I was a fan of his acting career, and when he played the tough guy, bouncer, gay friend in Victor Victoria, I thought that was a pretty good role out of Alex Karras, and I don't hold Webster against him either.
I don't think it was much of a reach to see an older ex-football player and a loving wife adopt a cute little kid like Emmanuel Lewis. I think everybody does that, don't they? I think that helps Alex Karras' cause.
You know, when you think of Alex Karras, you think of a character more so than a football player. This is a guy who's a movie star, who had that little failed attempt at Monday Night Football.
When the game acts like men, work together, win or lose, New York Jets keep rolling along. Isn't that terrific?
That's going to hurt him for eternity when it comes to the Hall of Fame.
He was a very borderline candidate to begin with, and then the gambling issue was a negative that maybe breaks a tie in the minds of some voters.
He got caught gambling with Paul Hornung. I think there was more gambling going on in those two guys, but those two guys missed 1963.
I never said that I was wrong, and I didn't kiss anyone's ass to get back in.
Alex was never contrite about that, the way Paul Hornung was. Consequently, Paul Hornung went into the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
The Golden Boy, Paul Hornung. Thank you.
And Karras has been barred.
I don't think he makes it on merit. I just don't think he was that dominating a football player.
George Wilson, who was the coach back in the 50s, called Alex Karras the best defensive tackle he ever saw.
He was really unblockable in our era. I'll always remember Alex Karras as one of the very, very best inside football players that ever played.
He was one of the great defensive linemen of all time. He belongs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame without question. If he is 8th in your list, I want to know who 1, 2, and 3 are.
Roger Craig was like Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix did things on the guitar nobody had seen before.
He was busting people. That's highlight reel material forever.
We had never seen a back that multidimensional. The fact that he was the first back in NFL history to rush for 1,000 yards and receive for 1,000 yards in the same season is all the proof that you need.
He did something nobody else had ever done, and winning championships at the same time. Roger Craig should be in the Hall of Fame.
Roger was righteous, but sorry, Bay Area, we're going with a different 49er running back.
The number 7 player not in the Hall of Fame, Ricky Watters.
Ricky put up far greater numbers.
His numbers probably dwarf people that are in the Hall of Fame.
With over 10,000 yards rushing and more than 4,000 yards receiving, our number 7 player has more total yards than many backs already in Canton.
When you look at Ricky Watters' numbers, you say he's a Hall of Famer.
Ricky Watters passes the 10,000-yard milestone.
Let the Waters run! When you look at Ricky Watters as a person, you say, man, you should buy a ticket to get in there.
Yeah, I need the ball. I'll get mine.
Here's what you remember about Ricky Watters, all the other stuff.
Some people don't go by the rules. Watters highs to smash mouth, loud mouth. Ricky Watters scores. The greatest of all time. Move up, Riley.
But you got to like guys with a little bit of swagger to them, especially at that running back position. You want a guy back there that believes that he can run through walls and nobody's going to stop him and he's going to let you know about it.
I'm young, I'm pretty, and can't possibly be beat.
Wasn't afraid to run his mouth a little bit.
I am good at talking.
Very emotional player. Think of Ricky Watters and you think of water. You think of the tears coming out of his eyes. His emotion to a lot of people was the greater focus than his talent.
I like the way he plays on the field. I just wish he'd shut up his mouth.
I don't think that should be a strike against them. Some of the greatest players in the history of the game are some of the most wacky personalities you could find. You got to just judge these guys on what they did on the football field.
I'm not going to argue with him.
The question with Ricky Watters would be, what is his defining moment?
Touchdown, Ricky, number 5. A playoff record
He had 5 touchdowns in a playoff game against the Giants.
I got one for my mom, my dad, my sister, and my nephew. Everybody.
The one thing that he doesn't have is a championship pedigree.
Hello?
Waters a great over-the-shoulder catch.
He had 3 touchdowns in a Super Bowl, but Ricky Waters gets lost.
He never won the big thing.
Glad Ricky Waters makes the catch. He's in. Touchdown.
Never got to shine in a Super Bowl. That might hurt him a little bit.
Young's 6 touchdown passes sets the record. It wasn't Ricky Waters' moment in people's memory.
Waters got his ring, but he also jumped ship right after that. He was gone.
It was a mutual disaster that he left the Niners.
They talking about they don't respect me. They gonna respect me now.
Both parties went down because of it. The Niners have not won a Super Bowl since Ricky Waters left.
Against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the vet, late in the game, Randall Cunningham threw a pass to him over the middle that Ricky Alligator on. He did not stretch all the way out for it. Eagles lost the opener.
He didn't want to take the hit. He did not extend for that football. It was there.
In the post-game news conference, somebody asked Ricky about not full extension for that particular play, and he said,
For who? For what?
For who, for what?
He says for who, for what. He was done. He was done. Done, done, done.
I heard some boos out there. I mean, how can I get boos? 1,200 yards. What are you booing about? 1,500 yards all purpose. I'm balling.
I don't know that Jim Brown would have ever said, you want me to get hit for who, for what? Jim Brown would have said, yeah, give me the ball. I'm going to hit you.
If Waters is good enough, I don't think that's going to keep him out of Canton.
When the Hall of Fame voters get in that room and Ricky Waters' name comes up, I guarantee you someone is saying, for who, for what? That'll haunt him forever.
The number 6 player not in the Hall of Fame, Tony Boselli.
So in my mind, any argument anybody wants to make about TD, Terrell Davis, being in the Hall of Fame, the exact same argument can be made for Tony Boselli, except Tony Boselli was even better than Terrell Davis.
Tony Boselli was, for 2 or 3 seasons, the best offensive lineman in the NFL.
Because when you tell the story of the NFL, when you talk about the 90s, it's impossible not to mention Tony Boselli because he was clearly one of the best top 2 or 3 at his position.
In recent years, the Pro Football Hall of Fame has given offensive linemen their due, electing John Ogden and Orlando Pace. But what about their contemporary, Tony Boselli?
For 5 years, forget Ogden, forget Orlando Pace. I love those guys, but Tony Boselli was the best left tackle in the NFL.
And he also had a good run on some good Jacksonville Jaguar teams. You know, some offenses that Mark Brunell and Jimmy Smith and Keenan McCardell, those guys were able to do a lot of good things, and Tony Boselli was the bell cow on that offensive line.
They were the outstanding young franchise that came from nowhere. And one of the cornerstones of that was Tony Boselli. Think about the Jaguars team that beat John Elway and the Broncos in the playoffs.
The Jaguars are going to the championship game, and they have stunned John Elway.
Those were the Tony Boselli eras in Jacksonville.
You know why we're here today? We got to take care of business. Because we are bad and we're better than these people. And we're going to whip their ass. Let's go.
Tony Boselli didn't just block guys. Tony Boselli physically punished other human beings, and I love him for it. He had that nasty mindset that we all want to have in our offensive linemen. Boselli was that good.
Tony Boselli was one of those guys that was the dominant guy and then had it all taken away by injury.
1st and 10 from the 49. Jacksonville back with it. Fred Taylor going over the left side and carving out 3. An injured player, and that may be Tony Boselli.
Tony Boselli was a real good player who probably, if he had not had injuries and his career shortened by injuries, I think probably would be a Hall of Fame.
We talk about the loss of Tony Boselli, and really, it's a huge impact on this offense.
I liked him as a player, but the prime of his career was probably a little too short to qualify for the Hall of Fame.
Tony Boselli, yes, he's iconic to the people of Duval County. Is he a Hall of Famer, though? Come on.
I'm not so sure I would say Tony's a Hall of Famer. Very good player, but I'm not sure he did it long enough at that position to be a Hall of Famer. It's a little different than some of the skill positions.
If you're the best in the game at what you do for 5 or 6 years at that position, then you should be in the Hall of Fame. I think he'll eventually get in even if it's on the Veterans Committee?
May even make it to the 15 one of these years, but I kind of think he's not going to make it to the Hall of Fame. It's purely because his body broke down.
The number 5 player not in the Hall of Fame, Cliff Branch.
What's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say Cliff Branch?
Speed.
Speed. Total speed.
As they too found that on the gridiron highway, speed does kill.
I think Cliff Branch was a game-changing kind of receiver. He was a guy that didn't catch an extremely high volume of passes, but for a team like the Raiders, who relied really on the vertical game, I mean, they were a deep ball throwing team, and you needed a big deep ball threat. I mean, that's exactly what he was.
Cliff Branch was a deep threat before there were real deep threats. In an era where you didn't throw deep and you didn't try to stretch the defense. Only the Raiders did.
Cliff Branch was one of the first guys who could go out there to just stretch the defense. He was one of the guys that they feared the most. I know Al Davis always talked about that the player that the defenses always fear the most. It was Cliff Branch.
Walk it back. Here comes the rush, but he has time. He's going on a deep bomb to Branch. Makes the catch of the 20, and the first bomb of Super Bowl 18 has been detonated. Walk it back. Throw it. Way up the field. Branch, plenty of room. Makes the catch at the 35. He's going all the way. 99 yards. Touchdown Raiders. Holy Toledo.
You see how good he was and what an impact he had on one of the game's most dynamic offenses. I think you can make a very strong case for him as a Hall of Famer.
Branch averaged an astonishing 24.2 yards per catch and 79 receiving yards per game in 1976. But it was another number that made him a trendsetter amongst his peers.
He wasn't just a blazer running, but he was a trailblazer because he wore that 21. 21, cool.
The minute they see that 2-1, it's Cliff Branch. Like he had that identifiable of a number. It's like 17 for Harold Carmichael, 00 for Ken Burrow. I mean, to me, it's iconic.
I don't think that enough receivers wear number 21 or anything like that. I think that's a rule that needs to be changed in the NFL. But he definitely needs to be in it. He was there with 2 different quarterbacks, catching all those touchdowns, huge part of those teams.
Throwing a deep bomb, going to Branch against Livers. Livers knocks it down. Branch catches it. Touchdown Raiders. Why does Swan make it and Branch is out?
It's your fault. It's your fault. It's NFL Films' fault. Because you've shown those Lynn Swan catches from Super Bowl 10 how many times?
And Swan beats the defensive back. Mark Washington on a great play. Gets the rush. He throws over the middle. With the ball is Lynn Swan.
Cliff Branch, though, was a more consistent player than Lynn Swan, and he was a scarier player, I guarantee you, to defensive backs than Lynn Swan.
Cliff Branch and goodbye.
I think that's a fair comparison when you look at Cliff Branch and Lynn Swan. And if Lynn Swan still got in with John Stallworth being really the better receiver, then why shouldn't Cliff Branch have a legitimate argument to get in, even though Fred Biletnikoff is on the other side? And Cliff Branch has championships as well. It's a good argument. You stumped me there a little bit there. That's a good comparison, and maybe Cliff Branch gets in.
The number 4 player not in the Hall of Fame, Terrell Davis.
Terrell Davis absolutely, positively belongs in the Hall, and he belongs in there right now.
This is the most ridiculous exclusion probably of all time. I'll say Tom Flores number 1, Terrell Davis number 2. You cannot tell the story of the 1990s without talking about Terrell Davis.
Here goes Terrell Davis, big hole TD, still on his feet, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown.
You got to be really, really, really special to be in the Hall of Fame. Terrell Davis, for the years he played, was special.
And he is a fabulous player. And yeah, you could throw a guy into that Denver offense and get a good performance, but when it was Clinton Portis, it was a great performance. And when it was Terrell Davis, it was a transcendent, historic performance.
What a run by Terrell Davis! How many tackles did he break on that baby? Elway, handoff, Davis into the end zone, touchdown!
I don't want to make it just about that Super Bowl 32, but keep in mind, he barely touched the field in the second quarter, and he went for 158 in that one. But the 158 he put up were man-style kind of yards.
You got to go out and measure him and say, was he the best among his peers? Terrell Davis definitely was. It's a crime against football to not have Terrell Davis in the Hall of Fame.
He ran right when the Broncos had basically invented their version of the zone blocking scheme. And you look, there were some gigantic holes.
Not to take anything away from Terrell Davis, that blocking scheme in that line was also pretty good.
That thing was blocked so well by the left side of the offensive line.
Terrell Davis, a very good player. In my mind, not a Hall of Famer because of how good that offensive line was for him during that time.
Terrell Davis, look at when he's playing. He's playing with Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, Jerome Bettis, Curtis Martin, and so on are in the league at that time, and he is unquestionably, for a 3-year period, the best of them.
He was one of the best running backs of his era. There is no way that you can keep him out of the Hall of Fame. If it's come down to something to where you're like, he didn't play long enough, why is Gale Sayers in the Hall of Fame?
Gale Sayers is the prime example. We all know how great Gale Sayers was in the short time in which he played in the National Football League. He tore his ACL, never played again. He's in the Hall of Fame. To me, Terrell Davis belongs in the Hall of Fame because of what he accomplished in the time that he played.
That window that Terrell Davis put up, like I say, for about 3 years, is as dominant a run as we've seen since probably Earl Campbell.
But longevity, I think, is part of it, unless you have a player like Jim Brown or Gale Sayers. As good as TD was, he's not Jim Brown or Gale Sayers, obviously. It's not like I'm breaking news here.
So he hurt his knee and he didn't play for 12 years. Give him a gold jacket already. It's ridiculous.
Drew Pearson was a big help to Roger Staubach.
He got me in the Hall of Fame with those catches.
But couldn't get himself onto our list.
Roger goes deep for Drew Pearson. Touchdown!
Harold Carmichael jumped his way to 79 touchdowns and a spot on the 1970s All-Decade team.
Carmichael with a good catch.
Otis Taylor won 3 AFL titles in Super Bowl IV with Kansas City.
That's the way, Otis. That's it, boys.
But still gets asked about Canton.
When are they going to?
A question you might hear from our number 3 player.
The number 3 player not in the Hall of Fame, Tiki Barber.
When we unveiled our list to the experts, some were very excited about Tiki's inclusion.
I am so glad my colleague Tiki is finally getting a little bit of love from you guys. Never do we see Tiki in any of these lists.
While others, not so much.
Tiki Barber's on this list? This is an abomination. Did Tiki Barber put this list together?
Nobody likes Tiki Barber. Not even his own brother, probably.
You put Tiki on this list just to upset Giants fans.
To me, I'm like, Tiki Barber's off the list, not in the top 10.
Tiki bothers me a little bit.
There were well thought out answers on why Barber should be in Canton.
There's nothing Tiki Barber could not do. He was an outstanding runner between the tackles. He could catch the ball. He could get to the outside. He had what I call juke ability to make guys miss.
And others a little more superficial.
Tiki Barber. He should be in the Hall of Fame with a name like that.
I think Tiki Barber has twice as good a chance of being in the Hall of Fame as anyone else, right? Because if he doesn't make it, and Rondé does make it, he can still go in there and take a picture next to the bus.
This is insane.
Don't worry, our logic for Tiki Barber being in the Hall of Fame is completely sane.
Tiki is the most productive running back in one of the most storied franchises' histories.
He was a 10,000-yard rusher. He was a 3-time Pro Bowler. Probably one of the best players in the NFL in 2004, 2005, 2006. If those are your qualifications for the Hall of Fame, yes, Tiki Barber's a Hall of Famer.
Hallelujah!
He's the best running back in 100 years of Giants football.
Tiki currently holds the Giants' rushing records for most yards in franchise history, most yards in a game, and has the top 3 rushing seasons for any player that wore Big Blue.
Only one they got is Tiki. We got to stop Tiki up front now. You see they trying to get him the ball every play.
The announcement of Tiki's retirement came in the middle of the 2006 season. His last game was scheduled to be Week 17 against the rival Redskins.
In 2006, when he ran against the Redskins, he literally ran the Giants into the playoffs.
In a win-and-in situation for the Giants, Barber broke his own single-game record with 234 yards and 3 touchdowns to put the New York Giants into the postseason.
Draw for Barber, squeaks left. Tiki runs out of a tackle. Tiki across midfield. Tiki to the 30. He needs a block to score. Touchdown, Tiki Barber!
It was one of those games that he put the team on his back. You know, he willed this team to victory.
And off Barber, runs right, finds his way through a hole to the 40, 35, 30. Barber to the 20, being chased from behind to the 10, to the 5, touchdown! Tiki Barber, his second 50-plus run tonight.
Yet the experts don't seem fully convinced on Tiki's credentials.
I guess I'd have to say that when you say Hall of Fame, I don't automatically associate that with Tiki Barber.
In my personal opinion, I think he should go. I like him.
That's going to be a tough call. He probably deserves it. I think pound for pound, there's no better running back the New York Giants have ever had. And I mean, meh.
Since only a third of modern-era players in the Hall are defensive,
Son, I got to do better than this.
It's harder for them to make our countdown, like 5-time Pro Bowl linebacker Tommy Nobis.
Tommy was easily as good as Ray Nitschke, Butkus.
Bronco backer Randy Gradishar went to 7 Pro Bowls.
I think it is an absolute tragedy that he is not in the Football Hall of Fame.
Cowboys linebacker Chuck Howley is the only player in NFL history to win Super Bowl MVP honors while playing on a losing team.
The game was really about the Dallas defense, and the best player was Chuck Howley.
The 5-time All-Pro is considered by many as the greatest linebacker in franchise history.
The number 2 player not in the Hall of Fame, Jim Marshall.
Jim Marshall, you wonder why it's taken so long.
I think Jim Marshall is one of the great overlooked names.
This was the Iron Man of pro football.
Come on, baby, let it all hang out now.
Nobody has done what Jim Marshall did. The durability, the endurance, to play defensive end for 20 seasons, for 282 consecutive games.
Hey, come on, baby, come on, let's have a nice clean one, okay?
I gave my absolute best. It's kind of like an airplane. You better keep your engines going, or you're going to fall and crash.
Our number 2 player's Hall candidacy has been in free fall since he retired, even though 2 of his fellow defensive line mates have landed softly in Canton.
When you think of the Purple People Eaters, you cannot talk about Alan Page and Carl Eller and leave out Jim Marshall.
We can't afford to have that, see?
He was just as good as Carl Eller, no question about it.
Jim Marshall, the Eller, the Page. The problem I have with the Hall of Fame for any of those Minnesota Vikings defensive linemen is every time I saw them in big games against the AFC, in Super Bowls, Chiefs, Miami, Pittsburgh, Raiders, they could not do a thing in a game. They look like they're flat as hell.
Jim Marshall was undersized. People knew they could run right at him. I know that was the game plan of us. It was a game plan of Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh's forward wall dominated the line of scrimmage.
It was a game plan of Oakland.
Shell was so overpowering that Marshall did not make a tackle the whole game.
So as a result, I would not put Marshall in the Hall of Fame.
I think there is still an image problem related to the wrong way play.
Kilmer driving for the first down, loses the football. It's picked up by Jim Marshall, who's running the wrong way.
He ran a fumble back the wrong way, 60 or 70 yards in a game against the San Francisco 49ers.
And he's running it into the end zone the wrong way, thinks he scored a touchdown.
People remember that fumble return.
Wrong way! To see that replayed over
Wrong way!
and over
Wrong way!
and over.
Thinks he scored a touchdown.
It's painful to watch.
If you had to pay me residuals every time you showed that play, I'd never have to work again.
It does overshadow his otherwise fine career.
If he gets a bad shake because of his wrong way run, people should reconsider that, because I think that only bolsters his credentials. It's one of the great moments in NFL history. It happened because he recovered a fumble, of which he recovered 29 opponents' fumbles in the course of his career. It's still a record.
That was one play in his career. A career is not one play, and a Hall of Fame election is not based on one play.
No player in the history of the game ever played harder, longer than Jim Marshall.
He's basically football's version of Cal Ripken. 20 years without missing a game. In that position on the defensive line, Marshall should be in the Hall of Fame.
To play 282 consecutive games is an amazing feat. Is it something that should be acknowledged? Absolutely. For that, you take Jim Marshall's uniform and you put it in the Hall of Fame.
I do think Jim Marshall belongs in the Hall of Fame. He played on one of the great teams of his time, and one of the great front fours of any time.
I think Jim Marshall eventually will be in the Hall of Fame, and I think his time is coming very shortly.
And now, the number one player not in the Hall of Fame, Jerry Kramer.
Jerry Kramer didn't know how good he was when he first joined the Green Bay Packers. You'd be surprised how much confidence a little success will bring.
I think of all the players that are not in the Hall of Fame,
Coach?
the one that mystifies me the most is Jerry Kramer. I don't know how he isn't in the Hall of Fame.
Jerry Kramer probably is accounting for about a fourth of my mail on a daily basis.
When you think of the Packers of the 60s, what do you remember? You remember Lombardi at the blackboard, a seal here.
What we're trying to get is a seal here.
And a seal here.
And a seal here. And try to run this play.
In the alley.
In the alley.
Getting the seal was the guards. And Jerry Kramer was the best at that particular skill. It was his agility and his speed to get out there and make that block that really made that Packer sweep effective.
With our number one player paving the way, Green Bay rolled to 5 NFL championships in the 60s, including the first 2 Super Bowls.
The Green Bay Packers, once again, are the world champions.
He certainly played on a lot of great teams, and that's what people look at. He was a big part of the reason we lost in '67.
17-14, Cowboys out in front. Packers trying for the go-ahead score.
It is the most celebrated block in pro football history.
Starr begins the count. Takes the snap.
It defines Kramer, but it also defines Lombardi's philosophy of football.
And the Green Bay Packers are going to be world champions.
Watch that number 64. That's Jerry Kramer, the best right guard in football doing his job.
They try to say Jerry was a one-play wonder, that block in the Ice Bowl was the only thing Jerry Kramer did, and that's not fair to Jerry. He's not looking at his career.
See how he opens up a hole with that block? It's pride that did that.
Jerry Kramer was a complete guard. In fact, Jerry Kramer should really have been the all-star of the 1962 championship game when he kicked the winning field goal against the Giants.
Jerry Kramer kicks, and the ball finds it. It's all over.
You know, unfortunately, guards don't get an even break in this business. They're overlooked.
I vote in the Baseball Hall of Fame, too, and it's easy. You get every stat you want. Football, we're still trying to figure out a stat for a right guard.
While the low number of guards in Canton hurts Kramer, so does the high number of Lombardi-era Packers already in the Hall.
Davis, Harding, Adderley.
11, counting St. Vince himself.
I think he's in that position, kind of like Bob Kuchenberg of the Miami Dolphins, where there's so many other players on his team that are already in the Hall of Fame that it gets in and says, well, how many Hall of Famers could this team have?
That makes no sense, because if a guy belongs, he belongs. And in the 60s, there were fewer teams and there were fewer players. Great teams could have many, many more Hall of Famers than teams today.
Was part of one of the great blocks in the history of football. Lombardi thought he was one of the greatest guards in the league, which is good enough for me.
When they picked the 50-year anniversary team of the entire league, Jerry Kramer was the guard. Every guy on that 50th anniversary team is in the Hall of Fame, except Jerry Kramer. I don't understand it.
Kramer is number 1 on our list.
Hall of Famer Jerry Kramer.
But that's no guarantee he'll make it to Canton. For when it comes to the Hall of Fame, the only sure thing is that everyone has a list of their own.
Let's talk about people that I want, my underrated people.
Otis Anderson totally gets overlooked.
A guy like Gary Yepremian, too.
Where's Tombstone Jackson?
Gary Clark.
Are you kidding me?
How about Joe Klecko? I mean, I bring them up and people look at their watch. What time is it?
If Len Dawson and Jim Kelly are in the Hall of Fame, Phil Simms has got to be in the Hall of Fame.
What? Denver's just ripped off.
To me, that doesn't matter. It really doesn't.
Floyd Little.
I would say no.
Barney Shavis.
No.
Carl Mecklenburg.
No.
Or Rick Upchurch.
I'd say no.
Randy Gradishar.
He's close.
Do something about that.
All right, that's all I got, Rick. Thanks very much.
Okay, buddy.